And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now! Joining us from Sacramento, California, is Bruce Marks, the founder and CEO of the Neighborhood Assistance Corporation of America, a housing services organization that's been calling for a national moratorium on foreclosures for years. Congressman Towns, I want to thank you for having been with us. I know you have to go, and I want to welcome Bruce Marks. Bruce Marks, tell us what you're doing in Sacramento. You're usually in Boston.
Right. I mean, we're here and we're doing a Save the Dream event here in Sacramento. We've had over 25,000 people over the last 4 days come through who are at risk of foreclosure, and we're restructuring mortgages, meaning people are saving $500, $1,000 a month, bringing interest rates down to as low as 2%. And people are sleeping overnight because we're going 24 hours. And we just got through with Los Angeles doing the same thing for 6 days for 125 straight hours. So clearly, in Los Angeles, we had over 45,000 homeowners come through. So clearly, it's just as devastating here as it's been over the last year or two.
We're going to go to break, then come back. Bruce Marks is founder and CEO of the Neighborhood Assistance Corporation of America, has been calling for a moratorium on foreclosures for years. I remember when we had him on as the banks were being bailed out, he said first and foremost is a nationwide moratorium on foreclosures. We'll also be joined by the lawyer for a woman who thought her house was being burglarized. She ran into the bathroom with her phone, called 911, and it turns out it was the bank who sent an agent to come into her house and change her locks. This is Democracy Now! Back in a minute.
Won't you be good to yourself? And don't you feel like coming home? It'll be good. It'll be like coming home. Blend all your days into weeks. Keep all your thoughts to yourself. It'll be good. It'll be like coming home. Because you need a place to stay. And I've been feeling dead since you went away. You better believe what I tell you, 'cause you're coming home. And won't you bring light to my day? And won't you be somebody new? It'll be good. It'll be like coming home. And tell me that you're
Coming Home by the 88 here on Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. We're broadcasting on close to 900 stations, on Pacifica and NPR stations, on college and community stations, on public access TV and PBS TV stations, and both TV satellite networks, on Dish Network, Channel 9415, Free Speech TV, 9410, Link TV, and on DirecTV, Channel 375. And we're video and audio podcasting at democracynow.org. Our headlines are also available in Spanish for any radio station to take, as over 250 are. Well, we're continuing on the issue of foreclosures. Last week, a Florida woman named Nancy Jacobini revealed an agent hired by her bank broke into her home after she fell behind on her mortgage payments. Nancy Jacobini of Orange County was inside her home when she heard the intruder. Thinking she was being burglarized, she called 911.
You hear somebody trying to open the front door?
Yes, yes.
Ma'am?
My alarm is going off.
Okay.
He's in the house.
He's in the house?
Yes.
So there's a male outside and inside? Is that?
They've got
I don't know. I'm locked in my bathroom. I don't know. I just know somebody broke into my house.
The intruder turned out to be an employee hired by Jacobini's bank, J.P. Morgan Chase, to change her locks, they said. But Jacobini was only 3 months behind in her payments. She wasn't in foreclosure.
Foreclosure. I was not given any warning. I am working in a loan modification, and I actually was perhaps maybe 4 months, 5 months behind at the most.
That was Nancy Jacobini on MSNBC. Chase has apologized for the incident, but Jacobini has hired an attorney to pursue legal action against the bank. Well, we're joined now from Tampa, Florida, by Nancy Jacobini's lawyer, Matthew Weidner. He's a consumer rights and foreclosure defense attorney and a frequent blogger on foreclosure issues at mattweidnerlaw.com. Matthew Weidner, welcome to Democracy Now!
Good morning, and thank you so much for having me.
This is just shocking. Explain exactly what happened with Nancy Jacobini.
Look, it's absolutely terrifying, and I wish this were an isolated incident. But the fact of the matter is, Nancy was sitting on her couch at about 5:30 in the evening. She hears the door being violently kicked and attacked, and she's absolutely certain that someone is breaking into her home. You can listen to that 911 tape, and you can hear the terror in her voice. But it's clear, it's absolutely important to keep in mind that she is not in foreclosure with this bank. And so she would have no reason to suspect that someone other than a burglar would be breaking into her home. And so she goes running into the bathroom with her cell phone. She's dialing 911, and she is just absolutely terrified. And it turns out, after the sheriffs are there, that this individual says that he's hired by the banks. Now, what's so terrifying about this episode is this is not at all unique. I have examples from all around the country where these banks, these jackbooted thugs that are hired by the banks, are kicking down the doors of people's homes all across the country. The thing to keep in mind, you know, the problems that are existing across this country are not isolated to people in foreclosure. And I think why this particular incident has caught the attention of people across the country is because they recognize that, wait a minute, if this happened to Nancy, then this could happen to me.
I mean, the story as it's told is that she was behind in her payments, but she wasn't even in foreclosure. So when you're in foreclosure, this is fine?
It's not at all fine ever, but this happens to people in foreclosure. Look, the problem is they're doing this when folks are not even in foreclosure. I've got examples all across the country where no foreclosure has even been filed. I think we're going to find examples of people that are in formal modifications with the banks where they have agreed, because the borrowers are making payments, that nothing at all will happen. But these jackbooted thugs continue with their work. You know, there are examples where people are living in their homes where they leave for a week or so, or they go on vacation, and these jackbooted thugs are kicking down the doors. And unfortunately, the jackbooted thugs that are representing the banks are emboldened by this. I confront law enforcement with these issues. Law enforcement, if you can get them to come out to the home, oftentimes won't take a report of these activities. If they do happen to take a report of the banks breaking in and taking property, they will almost always determine that no crime has been committed and there's nothing at all that we can do. That really is what's so disturbing and troubling, is that, you know, our law enforcement that work for us locally are working now for the banks and saying that what these banks are doing is acceptable. And I'm here to tell you it absolutely is not. I mean, let's keep in mind that one of the fundamental principles, a core value of this country, has been property ownership. We should have a right to be secure within our castles, within these homes that we own. And unfortunately, this foundation is being shaken by these banks because they are now just emboldened and kicking down the doors and coming in whenever they please.
Chase simply said, "We're sorry"?
Well, Chase at first wanted to confirm that the power was on in my client's name, but she's had power in her name uninterrupted for something like 20 years or so. An irrelevant fact whether power was in her name or not, but the fact of the matter is that sort of a typical response that these banks offer when this happens, if law enforcement calls or if press or someone calls, is, well, they've abandoned the home, or, well, they're in foreclosure, or, well, power isn't on, or something such as this. It's just an excuse, but I think when they offer that excuse to somebody that might question, that leads them off in a different direction. And so it's just completely unacceptable. And what Americans need to start waking up to is the fact that this is occurring with alarming frequency. You know, I'm pleased to appear on Democracy Now, but I'm going to suggest to you that maybe it's time we start changing to tell the truth about what's happening in this country. And the logo should read Kleptocracy Now, because that's very much what it feels like in this country, a kleptocracy, where those at the top of the pyramid are working feverishly and with amazing efficiency to take from everybody down near the bottom of the pyramid. That's frightening to me.
Matthew Weidner, you're saying she wasn't in foreclosure, so she wasn't in any way alerted about this, but they're saying because they thought she hadn't paid her electricity bill, that her electricity was cut off, they thought, which wasn't true, that's why they had sent in an agent to break into her house?
I believe that's just an excuse after the fact, but it's sort of a typical response. Whether she's got power in her name or not is totally irrelevant. Whether they had filed a foreclosure or not, again, totally irrelevant. The only justification or the only legal right that someone might have to break into your property is when they have an order from a court saying that despite the fact you own your home, this lender has a right to kick down your door while you're in there. So, you know, it's a red herring. They're throwing out excuses, but they're doing this in repeated instances.
Matthew Weidner, tell me about Darlene DeCenti, another of your clients.
Another client just south of us here in Tampa. A family had left to go take care of an ailing grandparent. The bank had actually been stalking them for months, driving by, taking pictures, making reports of the property. And shortly after they had left for a little bit to go take care of their ailing grandmother, they came home to find their house ransacked, property removed, and violated. They felt completely violated by what this bank had done. Again, another case of where they absolutely did not have the right to go in there and destroy and ransack that house. They did so. She's got very disturbing photographs, and they're still in that home.
B. Fisher, another client.
Again, I could keep going on and on with the stories that are more disturbing than the next. This is a client, again, south of us here in Tampa. She had let the house be used by some Canadian tourists. They came down to visit. As they went off to the beach, they came home and found that the house had been broken into, laptops stolen, their personal property stolen. When they called the sheriff's office came out. They at first refused to investigate. They found a cold beer had been cracked and left on the counter, and the Canadian tourist hadn't drank that beer. They took fingerprints on it. It turns out that the fingerprints belonged to some of the jackbooted thugs that came in and did this. My client had to scream bloody murder in order to get this sheriff's office to investigate. And when the thugs that came in and did this were interviewed by the sheriff's department, they admitted that it was part of their practice to go and enter into properties, prying open doors. The Palm Beach Post reported on this story, and the quote that burns me more than anything else was the president of the company that is attributed with these activities is quoted as saying, "We're not even fazed by lawsuits anymore."
Let's go back to Bruce Marks, who's usually in Boston, has been fighting for a moratorium on foreclosures for years now. He's with the Neighborhood Assistance Corporation of America. He's founder and CEO. He's in Sacramento right now. As you listen to these stories from Matt Weidner, Bruce, what do you hear? How typical is this?
Well, you know, Amy, this is very typical, but let's take a step back for a second. When President Obama was running for president, he said one of the first things he'll do is put a moratorium on foreclosures. He never did. He never backed bankruptcy reform so people can have the right to go in front of a bankruptcy judge. So, you know, and now this is not a paper issue. You know, we hear now, well, let's make the process right. This is, this is symbolic of this industry. When Wall Street and these banks started making loans, they never took into consideration what people can afford. Because there's so much money, billions and billions of dollars can be made on mass production of these mortgages. And they looked at homeowners as a commodity. Well, they've continued that same practice. Now what they're doing is in the foreclosure process, they're not looking at whether someone can afford to stay in their home. What they're saying is they're a commodity. There's a mass production out there, and they can't stop that conveyor belt. Well, the fact of the matter, this is not something where they didn't cross the T's and dot the I's. This is something that says this is an industry that is just based on greed. And where is President Obama when he says, well, you know, we don't want to upset the market? What is good about a market when someone is foreclosed on and, you know, next door to people who are making the mortgage payments, you've got a vacant building or you've got an investor-owned property with